everybody, to our first e-learning session. Really exciting to be able to bring this content to you. My name is Dwayne Henderson with Cree's Training and Education team. Just a little bit about the e-learning series that we'll be offering. Each session will be 15 minutes in duration. They'll be on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The sessions will be 15 minutes, but we will ask the presenters to hang on the line for questions, should there be questions at the end of each session. The attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to use the chat or Q&A box to submit questions. As Carrie mentioned, each session will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel within 24 hours of the session will be our goal. The sessions themselves will highlight subject matter experts from the Cree Lighting team. Great opportunity for you guys to be able to see a lot of the people that maybe in some cases you don't with, not only a lot of smart people, but a lot of great members on our team that we'll be able to highlight. So really excited about that. Our first presenter is Shirley Coyle, and Shirley is a longtime colleague, and you may recognize her name as a past IES president. Shirley, why don't you talk a little bit about your current role with the within the business itself?
Sure. Dwayne, you can hear me all right?
I can.
Thanks. Thanks for setting things up, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first e-learning session. In my role as head of specification sales for Cree Lighting, I am really fortunate to lead a talented team of regional specification sales managers across the United States as they support and collaborate with our agent partners and with the great community of lighting designers and consulting engineers doing lighting out in the field. And during this unprecedented time, all our sales team members are still available virtually from now, working from home, available to support you. So for my contact information will be on the at the end of the presentation. So please reach out if our team can be of any assistance.
Perfect. Thanks, Shirley. Now, today's session is entitled Understanding the Effects of Light on Human Health, but really you have a series within a series, and you'll be really doing a three-part series on lighting for well-being. Do you want to talk a little bit about what they can expect not only today, but the upcoming 2 Wednesdays that follow?
Sure. Because this is kind of a larger topic, we wanted to chunk it down into 3 pieces. So today we'll talk a bit of an update on the science itself and understanding the effects of light on human health. And then in the second week, next week on Wednesday, we'll dive into the WELL building standard, talking about how lighting is part of this voluntary building standard, review the requirements, and then go through metrics and tools for validating your design and some of the things that you're going to need to balance when you're doing a design that needs to meet a lighting design that meets WELL building. And then the final installment under Lighting for Wellbeing will come the following week, again on the Wednesday, April 15th. We'll look at several case studies related to lighting for human health to get a feel for what kind of results people are having out there and look deeper and what applications, what kind of application areas seem to be moving ahead under this standard. So let's get started.
Perfect. Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks, Wayne. We are instinctively drawn to light, but for most of the past century, our lighting design practices and standards have considered electric light mainly as a way to provide visibility and wayfinding in indoor and outdoor spaces. So lighting the task that is at hand depending on the space, or allowing people to navigate through a space or reveal the architecture. And the convenience of electric light electric light on demand has lengthened our days and shortened our nights. So now we're beginning to understand more fully that there are so many ways that light affects us beyond visibility, many different biological and behavioral effects. So, and it's not that this is something new. We've been well aware for a long time that things like seasonal affective disorder, SAD, can be treated with light therapy. So it's not that we haven't known there's a connection, but there's been a lot of interesting research, and it's really just the last 15 plus years that we've really understood once the discovery of iPRGCs, the ganglion cells in our retina that are intrinsically photosensitive. We really mostly were focused on rods and cones and how that helped us with vision, but now we're we've learned so much more once those were identified. And we'll talk a little bit more about that science, and that's how we're getting an understanding of the extent of the impact on light and human health. So if you think about how many hours we have in a day, that hasn't changed in the last few centuries, obviously. But what has changed is the ability for us to create electric light and have a day that extends longer into the evening. That's a relatively recent phenomenon when you think that Edison marketing the first light bulbs that happened in the late 1800s. But still, even by the mid 1900s, homes in rural U.S. were just getting electricity at that time. So we don't have to go very far back. If you think back a generation or two to your own family history, think about your grandparents' generation, their days and nights were much different than the days and nights we experienced. So they had much brighter days they were out under, and then their days were shaped much more by sunrise and sunset. So they would have evenings that revolved much more around natural light. So before electric light came along, people were under much brighter days and experiencing darker nights. And longer days, as I said, is a relatively new phenomenon, and we evolved into this dark light cycle. If you look at the graphic on the right-hand side here, this is kind of the circadian clock and showing how the circadian clock regulates our activities during the day and gets us set up so that we can be at our best during the day when we need to be strongest and able to respond. So we evolved under this light dark cycle that enabled us to be successful during the day, and then the full darkness at night that enabled us to sleep and repair and heal our bodies. But today, in most of our built environments, work, schools, home, our days are not bright enough generally, and our evenings indoors often have too much light in our homes to allow our bodies to maintain a healthy light-dark cycle. So let's look a little bit deeper at that. Most of you are quite familiar with circadian rhythm and the idea of melatonin. The natural cycle, circadian is the natural cycle of physical, mental, and behavior changes that the body goes through on a roughly 24-hour cycle. And it's about the changes that are affected by light and darkness. And melatonin is a natural hormone that's made by your body. It's not actively produced during the day. When darkness occurs, then melatonin production begins, and you begin to feel less alert, and there's sleep pressure, so sleep becomes more inviting. And usually melatonin levels will remain elevated for about 12 hours all through the night. But these days, as I mentioned, most of us spend about 90% of our time indoors under electric light. And what's the problem with that? Well, our typical indoor levels that we've been designing to, meeting our own standards as a lighting community, during the day, these amounts of light are often too dim to really let the body get the signals it needs to know that it's daylight. And then during the evening, we're often under light levels or using tablets and other devices that make it too bright to signal the body that it's nighttime. We also have complications that I would say we don't have right now since people are not flying, but everybody's familiar with jet lag. We can disrupt circadian rhythm and melatonin production by traveling across multiple time zones, so that creates temporary sleep disorder. And then there's also social jet lag, which is sleep disorder that's due to having a different schedule of sleep on non-work days. So if you're a weekend warrior and you like to be up late at night, sleep during the day, or the teenagers who want to sleep all day and flip their schedule on the weekend, that creates sleep disruption as well, circadian disruption. And then finally, there are other health effects that we now know are related to circadian rhythm and melatonin, things like obesity, depression, bipolar disorder, seasonal affective disorder, as mentioned earlier, and sleep disorders like insomnia. So it's a big deal in terms of what is controlled by the circadian clock. So here's an image of the circadian clock showing you some of the functions, not everything it does, but there are many different areas that physiologically are controlled by the circadian clock. So if you think about the clock as being kind of like an orchestra's conductor, during the daytime hours, this clock drives high levels of alertness and cognitive performance, memory, body temperature, and blood pressure, keeps them all at a high level so that we know we're in the awake cycle. And then on the flip side, for the sleep or the nighttime cycle, the circadian clock creates the secretion of the hormone melatonin. It creates muscle relaxation and then sleep pressure that gets us to go off to sleep. And the circadian system is also involved in the control of cell division and in the repair of DNA. So when you think about desynchronizing that clock, if it has implications for cell division and also repair of DNA, that's really serious. And the researchers feel that that's probably implicated, disruption of the circadian clock is implicated in shift workers who regularly are disrupting their light-dark cycle and working, say, in a hospital and they're under light during the evenings on a regular basis overnight, that may be implicated in causing cancer in night shift workers. So it's really for a separate issue for shift workers who are exposed to light regularly at night and constantly disrupting this cycle. So the importance of the circadian system and its synchronization appears to be crucial for human health. So that's why it's important for us in the lighting community when we're managing the amount of light that's going into spaces and proposing lighting systems and lighting solutions for spaces. So there's more than we've thought about in the past as far as light coming into the eye. We've thought about it in terms of the rods and cones getting light to be able to see, to have visibility, see the task, and find our way. But there are many biological and behavioral effects. So the eye, as I mentioned, contains these photoreceptors that were identified in the last couple of decades. If you look here at, these are called the IPRGCs, so they're intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. So when you look far left of this graphic, depending on how much light we're getting, as it comes through, it's the spectral content that will affect what those cells are getting, as well as the content and what time of day it is. And that comes through and goes into the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then goes to different systems, not just the circadian clock, but actually about 40% of the fibers that are coming from the retina are going to areas that are not in the circadian system. So that's a subject of great research, what other systems are being affected by light. So the challenge for lighting practitioners and those of us who are in the service of lighting practitioners and supporting them with, as I said, lighting equipment or lighting solutions, is that we kind of have a conflict between the way we've been designing lighting up until now and what we now need to think about for lighting for human health. We have typically over the years had our lighting recommendations. If you think about the IES recommended practices, these are based around visibility. So when we do that, we typically design for illuminance at the task, either a horizontal or vertical plane in focannals or lux. When we change to thinking about what we need for lighting for human health, the recommendations need to be a different quantity and metric, and it will be the stimulus at the eye, the actual energy getting into the eye. And it is complex. There are a bunch of different things we need to look at. So across the bottom of this slide, you'll see we're going to have to take into account intensity, what the spectral content is of the source or the luminaire, what the distribution of the luminaire is. If you think about, we need to get light into the retina, so depending on where you're mounting the luminaires and where the person is sitting and their viewing angle is all relevant to how much is going to get into the retina. And then duration is about not just how long they're getting that amount of light, but what time of day are they receiving it. And as you'll see when we get into the well building standard, the advice is to give higher levels of light and probably shorter wavelength light in the morning, late morning, so much higher intensity, and then in the afternoon to be backing off on those levels. One of the challenges is going to be, though, that we need to balance this with the energy codes that we've been looking at, we've brought down the light levels over time. So getting close to the end here, why should you care? You know, I hear from a lot of people, oh, there's so much going on, it's too complex. I don't want to prescribe lighting as though it's a drug. It's not our job as lighting designers or agents who are working with that community. But I think the reason this is really important is that we're already having an impact on people with the lighting that we put into spaces. So if you think about people who are in schools, whether it's the kids or the staff working in schools, the patients or the healthcare workers in the hospital or employees in offices, we're already having an impact. So it's important that we try to learn as much as we can about this and consider it when we're looking at either designing equipment, providing lighting solutions, or coming up with the lighting solution for the job. So it's an important subject to stay up to date on. So as we go forward next week, we're going to be talking about specifically the well building standard. There are a few other design standards out there. IES is working on one, and IES, as the ANSI organization for lighting, the American National Standards, is the consensus body for lighting. And we've got a great group of researchers, educators, industry people, and practitioners on that committee that are working on a new RP. UL also put out a design guideline for circadian entrainment, and we will go deeper in well building next week on Wednesday, which has probably been out the longest and is the most used right now as a well building standard. So that's a wrap on the first e-learning session. Next week, we will go deeper in the well building standard and then have the final installment. So thanks for joining us. I'll stay on the line now to see if there are any questions. Over to you, Dwayne.
Yeah, and Carrie, just to let you know, I am not seeing the questions, so if you can help us on your end, if you are seeing any questions that might be coming in for Shirley to respond to.
Yep, absolutely. So, Dwayne, the first question we have is, could we get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can look into making those available to folks. I'm not certain how the mechanism is, if it'll work through the RSMs, but that shouldn't be a problem. Shirley, are you fine with that?
Yep, that's fine. We just need to figure out, how we get that information, who we want it to go through. Sure, that's fine. We'll have an email for everybody, I think.
Yep, perfect. Okay, next question. Is IES responding to the NECB?
I am not familiar, so NECB, I'll get an answer on that. I don't know that we've specifically that the IES has given a position. We have not given a position statement on that yet as the IES, but I will get information on that. If maybe pop your email address into that chat box, whoever sent that question, and we'll make sure we get back to you afterwards.
Yep, Shirley, that came from Laurel, and she clarified to say specifically in regards to the reduced illumination guidelines.
Okay. I'll have to check that, Laurel, and get back to you.
Lindsay asked, can we get a link to sign up for the other 2 webinars? Yes, absolutely, Lindsay. We'll distribute that via email through our sales team. Nick asked, when will this be put on the YouTube channel? So our goal is to post these within 24 hours. So as soon as the recording is available, we'll get that up on YouTube, likely early this afternoon. Okay, and Brian's asking, to what extent is this messaging useful for end users or can be provided to end users in the sense that science is still forming, but we know that this is still important to discuss now. So how would you recommend proceeding with this type of conversation, Shirley?
I think as we go through these 3 sessions, Brian, we can figure out what the messaging, I think it's important that we be able to have some level of knowledge that we can pass on to people about why this is important and what we can consider. There are already some things we can do, future-proofing in terms of making sure that the solution that goes into a space for an end user has the flexibility for ramping up the amount of light. So whatever you're designing for, to have a little bit extra headroom in there so that at least for quantity of light, you can maybe able to accomplish things as the standards become better defined, or if they want to take advantage of lighting for wellness. It doesn't have to be color changing. It can be quantity of light rather than changing the spectrum of it. So it can be accomplished in a couple of different ways, and we should be able to come up with that as we get through these 3 sessions. So good thought.
Wonderful. So for folks on the line, you should have either a chat box or a Q&A box. Feel free to type in any questions. And I see another one. Oh, go ahead, Dwayne.
I was going to say, while we wait there, I think Shirley's spot on in terms of the flexibility of systems, right? So with the LED products, if you're installing a system that's going to last a decade or longer, you know, having the flexibility of the system to be able to kind of evolve as the science comes in and recognize kind of where these spaces need to go is probably at minimum something you should.
Wonderful. Another question from Nicole is, beyond hospitals, what are some other applications for lighting for wellness standards?
So Nicole, we're seeing requests to the specification community for classrooms is another common space that we're seeing this in. There are some, when we do the case studies in the 3rd session, you'll get a better idea, but certainly in behavioral healthcare, that's a big place that being able to use lighting to manage stress levels or have fewer incidents with people who are in facilities full-time who can't go outside for behavior issues, that has been helpful, as well as Alzheimer patients, and a big value of having systems that consider having higher light levels during the daytime and reducing the light and maybe changing the spectrum to warmer at night. It allows, the case studies, as you'll see, will allow people to consolidate their sleep. So instead of having such fragmented sleep, they get more consolidated, longer stretches of sleep, and that has a huge impact on the patients. And again, we have fewer falls and fewer behavioral incidents during the day.
All right, and just another reminder, you feel free to type in any questions you have into the chat box or the Q&A box, and Shirley and team will hang around just another minute or two to see if we get any other questions in.
Feel free, anyone, if you want to just send me an email to the address on the screen here, and I think I will
yeah, Shirley, I think that
pass it to you.
Yeah, Shirley, I think just for next week's session, just to think about, and you touched on this a little bit, right? We're now designing for the visibility or the task being performed in spaces, and we're also designing for well-being. The 3rd leg will be kind of the energy part of it, so that's kind of what you'll lead into next week.
Yes, absolutely. We'll definitely talk about that. Some of the balancing act that people have to consider, that if you're going to do this kind of lighting, you need to set expectations that there will be some increased energy requirement for maybe 3 hours during the morning. So hopefully that can be offset by using controls at other times of day and reducing the light level more significantly toward the end of the day.
Perfect. Perfect. So join us next Wednesday for that conversation. Shirley, I want to thank you very much for kicking us off here, and you did a great job as expected. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks, Dwayne. Happy to have the chance. Thanks.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Just to kind of heads up on what's coming on Friday, we'll have our first kind of controls-based conversation around how a smart home can help you understand your customer. So we'll have a couple of folks from our intelligent lighting team joining us to kind of go through that. If you have any feedback to share or comments or suggestions, please feel free to send me an email as well. As mentioned before, the recorded content should show up on the Cree Lighting YouTube page within 24 hours of the event, so you can always catch up there as well. If there's nothing else, again, thanks for joining us. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.